And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud sole lead arranger and infrastructure finance structuring agent of the South African National Treasury's 11.8 billion rand infrastructure and development finance bond. Good evening. Welcome to the program. 9 minutes after 6. I'm Stephen Grootes. Is the day sort of sandwiched between a weekend and a public holiday, and in that way a strange kind of day? All of that said, there's still quite a few things going on, and I expect it to sort of be like this. If you consider what's happening in other parts of the world at the moment, if you look at some of the big changes we're seeing in our society around payment, for example, will you expect these sorts of things to be happening? Look at the fight over Starlink. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you would expect there to be some kind of dispute. We're not with you tomorrow, but we are with you on Wednesday and for the rest of the week. So plenty to look forward to in terms of money heading into the Christmas season. And even again today, more sort of Christmas cheer around consumers, how people are feeling and what people are actually doing. I noticed the big fight over Starlink, and I do think it's probably going to get a bit more intense. There are developments today from the presidency. You'll hear that in a moment. Duncan McLeod's the founder and editor at Tech Central on your radio in a couple of minutes from now. We'll talk about the wine industry. They seem to have had very good weather. I couldn't tell you what makes good wine. I'm presuming it depends on the type of wine that you're producing, and you probably need a sort of, proper, sort of sharp sun to produce a sharp taste or something. I have no idea. I'm not really a wine fundy. I think you know that about me, although I have been offered education in this area by many, many well-meaning people. But they seem to be very positive. We'll speak to Wandile Sihlobo around that. Consumer confidence, again, more numbers coming through. Sunisha Pakrasamy from Momentum Investments. She's the chief economist there. We'll talk about that. And Ernest North's a co-founder of Naked, the insurance platform. They're looking at what happens if you change your patterns. If you're no longer the person driving your car over Christmas, but your sister is, or your son is, or whoever. What happens if there's an accident? What happens if you let your house out? And I think those are important things. And then we'll help you get into the sort of festive cheer a little bit from 7:30. We'll speak to Peter Tempelhoff. He's the first South African chef to receive the Three Knives Award. He's at the he runs the FYN Fine Dining Experiences. He's been in the business for a very long time. There's some interesting stories. Looking forward to that conversation as well. Good to hear from you, of course, on 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
A lot more talk about ATMs at the moment, and plans, it seems, by the Reserve Bank. And what they're suggesting is that ATMs will no longer be sort of competing. You would no longer have to pay more to use one, or not always able to use your, the full bouquet of services at another if it wasn't from your bank. The idea, as I understand it, would be that instead of having a sort of FNB, Capitec, ABSA sort of thing, you would have a different arrangement where essentially one company would manage all of the ATMs and you would be charged the same no matter which one you went to. It does make sense. I know that sometimes you go into a petrol station, it's late at night, and for the convenience you sort of end up paying a little bit more sometimes to use some of those ATMs, not all of them. And there are various services. Just to streamline it and to sort of remove the costs, I think that surely is a good thing. I'm going to be fascinated by how it all pans out, though. But it did just make me think about how the way in which we pay for things has changed so dramatically. I mean, I still find it quite strange to withdraw cash without actually having a card. You start it on the app and you sort of withdraw it in that way. And then I realized today, I actually don't think I have a debit card. I have a credit card, but I use that really through my phone and I hardly ever see it. But it really does show you how things have changed. But here's a question for you. If you were no longer using an ATM to draw cash, what could ATMs be used for? They remind me a little bit of Gauteng's e-toll gantries. What would you use them for if they're not just for that? And yes, I imagine a slightly more secure way of managing your money, so not on your phone. But once you're running a bank on your phone, does it really matter? I know Standard Bank had problems with their app today. You might like to tell us your stories about it, but that does seem to be fixed now. It was just the app internet banking itself worked, I understand. I think FNB had a problem on Black Friday. but just your recommendations, how you would change payment systems. 072 702 1702.
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
Well, several developments today over what I think is going to be a big political and, I suppose, legal fight over black economic empowerment and Elon Musk. Through the day, people aligned with the ANC, including Parliament's Communications Committee Chair, Kusela Sangoni Diko, slamming the Communications Minister, Solly Malatsi. He's from the DA. He published regulations that would allow ICASA to consider equity equivalence programs when licensing communications services. Essentially, what that means is Starlink wouldn't have to give up any equity to operate here. She joined the Deputy Communications Minister, Wandile Sihlobo, also from the ANC, who said the regulations must be withdrawn. Then today, the presidential spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, spoke about the issue. This clip is thanks to Newsroom Africa Channel 405.
The application for a license coming out of that subsector of the communications and ICT sector is not only from Starlink. So we should just avoid the trap of getting fixated over Starlink. There are 4 or 5 other companies that have expressed interest in providing their services here in South Africa. It's not only Starlink. What the minister is doing is within the law, which we must emphasize, within the law, is to look at what can be done to accelerate those processes, right? As you know, the law is quite clear with respect to the local ownership element for those seeking to be licensed as telecommunications and network services providers. And so that's what the minister is doing. So the president has been aware of that process. However, what the president will not endorse and cannot endorse is the subversion of the law. And in his engagements with various role players in this sector, the president has been quite clear that whatever is done must be done within the framework of our laws. And so if it turns out that ICASA cannot do anything beyond what is written in law, then the process will be to look at an amendment of the legislation. That is well guided in our statute in terms of how it needs to proceed.
Vincent Magwenya speaking this morning. Thanks to Newsroom Africa for that clip. Duncan McLeod is the editor at Tech Central. Duncan, good evening. I think this is going to be a big fight. How do you assess what's really going on?
Yeah, hi, Stephen. There's so many angles to this. It's difficult to know where to start. First of all, clearly the portfolio chair, Kusela Diko, and the deputy communications minister have collaborated, if that's the right word, colluded to gang up on Solly Malatsi over this issue. I think maybe I'll start by saying that previous ANC communications ministers, probably including Wandile Sihlobo himself, have issued numerous policy directives to ICASA over the years. They've done this without even issuing these policy directives in draft form for Parliament and other stakeholders to consider before issuing them in final form. In this particular case, Solly Malatsi published the policy directive in draft form all the way back in May, so it's taken 7 months. It's been in Parliament, it's been debated for the past 7 months before he finalized it and issued it to ICASA last Friday. So I think the ANC is being a bit rich here in claiming that he's breaking the law, etc., when in fact this is a mechanism that is allowed under the law and has been used extensively by ANC communications ministers in the past. So as far as I know, and the legal experts I've spoken to in the sector over the last 24 hours, there is nothing illegal or unlawful about what he has done in issuing this policy directive. And now we have the president's spokesman, Vincent Magwenya, clarifying, and I thought in a very measured sort of statement this morning, and contradicting the statement that the ANC put out, saying that this was actually unlawful by the minister and that he was trying to circumvent parliamentary processes. What the politics are behind this, I don't know. I understand that the Deputy Communications Minister, Wandile Sihlobo, who was previously the minister, has his nose out of joint about having been demoted by Ramaphosa. when the new cabinet was appointed last year. And I don't know what the exact politics are behind this inside the ANC, and I don't know which particular faction of the ANC Wandile Sihlobo is associated with, or whether this is just simply a case of a former minister who has his nose out of joint about being demoted. But there's a lot of politics here. It's going to be a huge fight over this, especially with elements in the ANC and left-wing parties like the EFF and the MK. Saying that they're going to fight this in the streets and fight it in the courts, etc., etc. So this is going to be a huge political bun fight, and honestly, South Africa doesn't need it.
A couple of sort of technical questions, if I may. I was interested in the timing. So Solly Malatsi does it just before already the start of the festive season, probably making sure that this is the fight of the festive season.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if that was deliberate. Let me put my question like this. Was there any reason why he could suddenly do it now? Was there another process that ended that you might be aware of? Was there some reason that now was the right time technically for him to announce it?
My suspicion is that he announced it on the effectively the last Friday of the year for many people who, the work year for many people. A lot of people have gone on holiday, and I think he may have just been hoping that this wouldn't have blown up into a huge political fight, which is, of course, what has now happened. I think he may have just hoping to quietly bury it into the festive season and revisit it next year and hope that, and I'm sure he was aware that there was going to be pushback. So I'm sure that played into the fact that the timing of it. Whether there was more to the timing behind it, I'm not sure, but I would imagine that was the main thinking behind publishing it on the last Friday of the year.
One of the things that gives us such political heat is the figure of Elon Musk, right? I mean, let's be clear. When Vincent Magwenya says there are other people who might want to do the same thing, are there others? Would this would obviously affect them too?
Yes, it would. Amazon Leo, which was previously called Project Kuiper, is a direct competitor to Starlink. They're a bit behind Starlink in terms of quite a bit behind Starlink in terms of launching satellites and starting to offer services. But they're coming for Musk. Jeff Bezos is very much interested in competing head-on with SpaceX and Starlink in this market. We know that Amazon Leo representatives are active on the ground in South Africa, actively talking to internet service providers and to telecommunications operators here, and have started signing partnership agreements with those companies. So there's no doubt that it's coming. That the company hasn't said anything about or hasn't voiced its views on the 30% requirement, so we don't know whether or not they're willing to sell 30% equity to comply with the ICASA process, and maybe they'll do that just because Musk has the opposite view. They compete directly and very heavily. Musk and Bezos do not particularly like each other. So yes, there are other players, other satellite internet providers coming. We know the Chinese are also launching satellite networks, also to low Earth orbit satellite networks that are also going to compete with Starlink and Amazon Leo and others. So yes, the market's getting very competitive and new players are coming into the market, and Vincent Magwenya is quite right that they'll be seeking licenses.
Duncan McLeod, thank you. Really do appreciate the time. Editor at techcentral.co.za, 22 after 6.
702. Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
Well, some news from our wine industry. It looks like they've had good conditions over the period. They're expecting a strong harvest this year. Wandile Sihlobo is Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa. Wandile, good evening. I have no idea what makes good wine in terms of weather, but clearly our producers are feeling very positive.
Stephen, farmers keep bringing you good news on radio.
They do, yes.
And I'll tell you this. It's not only a large volume of wine, because taste and quality, Stephen, when it comes to wine matters. And this time around, because we had this intense heat and nice rains at an appropriate time, it turns out that the maturation of the grapes have actually been excellent, and the volume, of course, has been good. And now, as the folks are looking into processing and getting into season, it appears that we will actually have decent volumes, higher than last year. And, of course, the quality will be as excellent. The only thing now, Stephen, will be who do we sell all of this quality to in the world market?
I'm going to come to that because that's the big question. I do want to just check, though. Do different types of wine grapes want different types of conditions? In other words, do green grapes, I presume white wine, and red grapes, I presume red wine, but I know virtually nothing about wine, do they prefer different conditions?
They prefer generally similar conditions, Stephen, and of course the soil and the region at which it's planted is one of the key determinants as to how much yield one gets. As you can see that we have a concentration of our wine grapes in the Western Cape region and of course a little bit in the Northern Cape. And by the way, I was just now in this area of Kakamas here in the Northern Cape, and it's increasingly adding to that brandy that they've long been producing in that area. Also some good wine that is coming up in that area. So really generally that, but Stephen, the weather conditions are in all of the varieties that we plant is largely the same.
Okay, so now who are we going to sell it to? The US, presumably not so much.
Stephen, there are people in Europe that must pay for this high quality wine we produce, as well as the UK. And of course, we continue to look in other markets in Asia, particularly China. But China is problematic, Stephen, in a sense that our wine still face a duty of between 14 and 20% tariff, depending if it's bulk or bottled. If it's bulk, it can face 20% tariffs and 14% if it's bottled, while our friends down there in Australia and elsewhere are entering that market duty-free. So in our conversations with them about lowering duties, wine is always on top of mind. The US is important because about 4% or so of our wine, similar to the overall share percentage, is the one that typically goes to that US market. But of course, it's presenting pressures on certain family businesses that have greater exposure. But industry-wise, if we are able to divert a bit of more volume to the EU and the UK and other markets, we will be able to continue to thrive well.
I mean, I know so many people who come to South Africa and say, wow, your wine is great, and it's cheap. And I've always thought that we would be able to compete really strongly on price in markets like the EU or the UK. That, you know, price would be, because the quality is certainly there, that price would really be the great sort of unique selling point for us.
I mean, you know what? The reality is that the consumer in the world market are the ones that put a premium on what region and not or what region. And I think they not always be thinking about the quality on this. The fact that we are in the southern tip of Africa does have its own drag on us if one is talking now looking globally. Because if you are producing from France and you are producing from Argentina or Australia, there's always this assumption that somehow your wine is good. But that's not always the case. I mean, there's been various studies and some of the anecdotal experience, like the one that you are explaining now, where it turns out that South Africa actually punches above the weight. And I think that's the message that the global consumer needs to get, which is why I think that in all of these marketing efforts that many people at South Africa Wines, Vinpro, and various private brands, they go and market. And I think that even on this conversation, Stephen, that we always talk about of export diversification, I think that the marketing element by Brand SA has to be huge, because wine is not just a commodity. We have to say we are now presenting processed high quality products. And I think that the marketing aspect is very important.
Wandile, thank you so much. Wandile Sihlobo is Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa.
The Money Show.
The Markets.
Gustav Schullenberg's Portfolio Manager at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Gustav, good evening. Not a lot going on the JSE. Very few announcements. SENS very quiet, as you would expect. Lots of optimism around next year. We'll talk consumer confidence numbers soon, which are also very confident. We had John Bickard on the Money Show on Friday. He was very confident about next year. How optimistic are you?
Yeah, good evening, Stephen, and all the listeners. Thanks for having me. It certainly seems to be turning, and I think it's turning slowly in the background in terms of improving versus what we've become accustomed to over the last 10 or 10 years. And that bodes well. We can see, when we look at bond prices and the yields on that, when we look at the currency, there's certainly a lot more confidence coming. And if it follows previous cycles, then unfortunately locals are lost to notice. But headwinds are certainly dissipating and some even turning into tailwinds.
A big part of it for us, obviously, this year has been the gold price. Do you expect it to stay where it is? I mean, there's so many different factors driving it, and I don't see many of the factors going away. Some of them, of course, are in the United States.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is an external factor like the gold price could be the kind of the match that lights the fire. There's many other factors in SA. I mean, if we look at the factual data rather than kind of emotions and narratives, Transnet, load shedding, governance, everything seems to be picking up in the right way, in the right direction. Grey listing being removed, etc. Coming onto the gold price, which is obviously good, and combined with that PGM, so kind of your precious metal prices, they've been bid up and massive tailwind in terms of taxes and exports and kind of impact on the fiscus. Where the gold price goes, I don't know. We quite bullish gold as a metal. One can see that it's being bid. Central banks globally are buying. There's the retail market is starting to get behind it. If we look at the flows in the ETFs, that money is looking for a home. Obviously, when we look at miners and equities, one has to overlay that with things like valuation and what's priced in. But if we're talking pure metal, in dollar terms, I think 5,000 is on the cards, maybe even more. The tricky question is, does it go down to 3.5 first and then to 5.5, or can it continue this? Assets typically don't go up in a straight line, so it's had a hell of a run, and we must enjoy that. Over the short term, I think one must be careful to assume that this is one-way bet.
Sure. Very quickly, I mean, the rand stronger to the dollar again today. Lots of talk about Trump's pick to be and sort of who it might be to chair the U.S. Federal Reserve. I presume one is leading to the other, the dollar a bit weaker because of that?
Yeah, market kind of looks through it, and I think the market's pricing in whoever comes in will probably, Trump will have their ear. So you could see them lowering rates or pushing for rates to be lower. And that will put pressure on the dollar. The dollar is the US is economically in a tricky position with their debt balance and could probably do with a weaker dollar. That's good for us. Lower petrol prices, lower cost on imports. So, I think this might only be the start. People, if you look at a long-term chart, people forget about 13 rand to the dollar. It feels like a distant memory. 13, 14 wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. Gustav Schullenberg, Portfolio Manager at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Just after 6.
WhatsApp Stephen
on 072
702
1702.
Well, talking about ATMs, the move away from cash, but then also the idea from the Reserve Bank, a good one, I think, that would basically mean banks don't have their own ATMs. There will be a sort of company owned by all the banks or some way of doing it, and you'll pay the same to draw cash at every ATM. Some responses to that tonight.
Hi, Stephen. I think we forget that ATMs are used for SASSA grants to withdraw money from there. So a vast majority of the country doesn't have access to electronic services and apps and things like that. So it's a minority that uses the technology. The majority require ATMs. They require cash. So as much as we talk about being cashless society and all that, you're excluding a vast majority of the country. And if you look at the story of how Capitec started in the first place, it's from overlooking the majority and someone saying, let's take advantage of that opportunity. So let's not forget that the majority of the country is not cashless. So stop trying to push us in that direction and service the rest of the country accordingly.
No, sure, I hear you. I mean, I think what people are expecting is that at some point, not too long away, we'll end up with sort of 30 to 40% of people using cash. So the number will go down. I know that there are many millions of people in South Africa who don't have much access to data and to phones, but there are about twice as many phones as there are people in South Africa. So I don't think we should overplay that either. Try and get some hard numbers on that actually might be a useful talking point, something to just consider. Other voice notes tonight, we've been talking about Starlink.
Hey guys, yo 702 fam. Just a wonder though, who ever thought where would be the last place Elon Musk or whoever now is in the pool of the new companies that, we hear in the ICASA, Starlink chats and all, though, of all of them, do any one of them actually even spend any time in South Africa? Because it's great, Elon Musk and all, but to give that, it was maybe triggered by that and the visit of the president to the White House. Though whoever considered that even Elon Musk is a beneficiary of the South African government, since he did, after all, go to a public school. Pretoria Boys High is a government school. So yeah, just a thought there from K-Verb in Midrand.
David, thanks. Yeah, no, interesting. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure what the right answer is. I do think equity equivalence, I think on balance, does make sense to me. I think the arguments against it for something as international as Starlink and the other services, I think it's quite tough to make. But your views, please. 072-702-1702.
702 with Stephen Grootes.
Email him on stephen@702.co.za.
16 minutes to 7 the time. Well, more news about the way you're feeling during the start of the festive season. The latest Momentum Investment Consumer Pulse numbers showing a big lift in consumer confidence. The Consumer Confidence Index moving from -13 to -9. It's actually the highest level this year. Sanisha Pakrasamy is the chief economist at Momentum Investments. Sanisha, good evening. Good to chat again. What's changed to make us feel a little bit more confident? Is it something government has done?
Good evening, Stephen, and a good evening to all of your listeners tonight. I think there were a couple of factors that came through that really boosted the consumer sentiment in this past quarter's reading. And according to F&B and the Bureau of Economic Research, who essentially conduct this survey, they did point out a number of economic factors that in particular helped consumers just to feel a tad more optimistic than previously. So first of all, we had an interest rate cut that came through in November, and that of course does offer a relief to those that are indebted, especially with prime-linked debt on mortgages or vehicles. There was also the fact that we had an appreciation in the currency, and together with stable international oil prices, we actually saw that petrol prices came in lower between August and November. We also saw moderation in food inflation. And of course, we know that food is quite a big chunk of the bulk of South Africans' inflation basket. There were a few job gains that also came through in the third quarter. I think, that the jobs market is still quite soft, but those gains helped in the third quarter. And then, of course, we had the credit rating upgrade from S&P Global, and the fact that the country was removed from the Financial Action Task Force grey list. And I think in conjunction, all of these aided a slightly better reading on that consumer confidence metric, although it did still stay in negative territory.
I mean, everyone talks about the interest rate cut, and I get that, but it's still not a huge amount of money for most people, surely. I mean, yes, it's a trend in the right direction, but do you think people are actually feeling they have more money in their pockets? I mean, the figures, I suppose, show that they do in some way.
I think we have to look at it on a cumulative basis. And so if we look at 2025 as a whole, that was the fourth interest rate cut that came through from the South African Reserve Bank. Typically, there is a 12 to 18-month transmission mechanism with interest rate policy into the real economy. And so often you don't find that the full positive impact comes through straight away. And so we can potentially still accrue some of those benefits further down the line. And so, with money that's not now spent on interest on your mortgage or on your vehicle loan, that does leave a bit more cash in consumers' pockets at the end of the day. I think what was a bigger factor for the consumer this year, however, was the fact that we had real wage gains. And that was mostly because inflation was reasonably well behaved this year. And so that opened up quite a nice gap between nominal wages and effectively your real wage gain that then picked up as inflation fell. And we know that in South Africa, most consumers don't typically save. And so any of those real gains that come through on the real wage front ends up coming through in household consumption. And I think that's, been a signal that the consumer's done a bit better. And we don't have, obviously, the fourth quarter numbers for gross domestic product or GDP just yet. But I think we could be looking at consumption spending close to 2.7% in terms of growth this year, which is quite strong, given that the overall economy is probably around 1.2% worth of growth.
I mean, what that should mean is that the festive shopping season would be bigger. I realize, it doesn't start on the 16th anymore. It starts sort of Black Friday-ish, beginning of November even now. But would you expect that actually there might be an uptick in the amount of money spent over the next couple of weeks?
I think all signs are indicating, especially since we had quite robust Black Friday sales, that momentum could potentially continue into Christmas sales, festive season sales into the end of the year. And so, the components that we saw getting quite a boost over the Black Friday sales were things like electronics, health and beauty purchases, home furnishings. And so, if we look typically in the past couple of quarters, the sector that lags the most is what we call durable goods. It's, more of your discretionary items, the white goods in the household. So, those lag for quite some time, but we are now starting to see a bit of catch-up coming through in spending in those components. And I think we can potentially see some of that momentum persisting into the festive season.
Events at the top level, I'm talking about, the National Coalition, lower government debt, that kind of thing. Do you think, it's hard to know, I find it difficult to know, if that's having an impact on how people are feeling? My gut tells me it must, but only a little bit.
I think the politics comes through very strongly when we look at the business confidence index. On the consumer level, what we have seen in the past that dented consumer sentiment quite significantly was whenever we had big bouts of load shedding, which is also associated with general political uncertainty, the uncertain climate, which also pulls through into the business sentiment indicator. But I think, we do have a negative political environment can weigh on the consumer. And typically around your election periods, you do feel that impact coming through at a consumer sentiment level. I think that comes with the caveat that it's most strongly felt at a business level, because that can dent things like profitability, sales margins, etc. So I think that impact comes through, but I think we see it more strongly on the business confidence index more so than the consumer sentiment side.
I would like to hope that this also means this sort of increased confidence goes into the beginning of next year, and that maybe, the big uniform stationery shop is maybe a little easier for a few people. Obviously hard to know exactly what happens, but I'd like to think this confidence continues.
Yeah, I think, we need to look at the drivers for the consumer going into 2026. I think that element of real wage growth is going to persist simply because we've got the average outlook for inflation next year a little bit lower. And I think, that will aid in purchasing power remaining robust for the consumer. We've seen a slight tick up on the household credit growth side. I say slight because relative to its long-term history, it is still quite muted. But, in real terms, that is now starting to creep up. Mortgages, that loan growth has been quite suppressed. But outside of that, we have seen more robust growth in things like general loans, installment sales, credit, leasing, finance, credit cards, and that does aid consumption. And then perhaps a slight uptick in jobs growth, given that we are expecting the economy to do a little bit better next year. We're anticipating growth of 1.6% relative to an expected 1.2% this year. And so all of these components together, I think, does concoct a recipe for household consumption to remain a reasonable contributor of growth. But I think where we are hanging our hat is for some recovery to start coming through on the fixed investment side. Now, we've started to see some tentative signs that corporate credit growth has been quite firm. That's been on the back of working capital requirements, according to the South African Reserve Bank, but also quite a big element coming through there on the renewable energy side. And so, if we can get fixed investment growing once again, that's a far more sustainable anchor of economic growth in South Africa.
Sanisha, thank you very much indeed. Sanisha Pakarasamy is the Chief Economist at Momentum Investments.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB, proud sole lead arranger and infrastructure finance structuring agent of the South African National Treasury's 11.8 billion rand infrastructure and development finance bond.
5 minutes now to 7, Stephen. 7 o'clock. Let's get it right, shall we? I don't know what you're doing over the holidays. I know, though, my patterns will be disrupted. I'm sure yours will too. It might not just be you driving your car, might be your daughter, might be your brother, might be whoever. You might actually have people in the house, by which I mean renting it out, maybe Airbnb if you're at the coast, making a fortune out of people like us who are not at the coast. What about insurance, though? What happens if something goes wrong? Ernst North is co-founder of Naked. Ernst, good evening. I don't know if you've ever been the subject of one of your billboards or not, but if you're renting out your house, what do you need to know about insurance? I mean, does it matter who was in the house if there is an incident?
Good evening, Stephen. Yes, it's a good question, and the answer is yes. It does matter who is in it, and it does matter who's driving your car. I think there's a big difference. Let's talk about the home first. There's a big difference about a family that lives in your house long term, and the insurer knows about them and knows if there's anything that they do on a regular basis, versus a paying guest that arrives. And you know very little about them, and they arrive for 2 or 3 days. So there's a very big change in risk profile. And so the recommendation is, if you are going to be allowing friends or family to stay in your house rent-free, then it doesn't impact your insurance policy at all. Just ask them to look after the place as well as they could, as well as you would, but it doesn't affect your insurance at all. If you are renting out your house on a short-term basis, then you do have to let your insurer know. Number one, for the structural insurance, they need to know if there's somebody that, if there are high turnover of people coming on a regular basis. But number two, for your easily portable items, when you're renting out your house, obviously those can't be insured for theft of somebody that you don't know coming into your house.
Yeah, I imagine that would be the big thing. I would presume it's the short-term rental that's actually really the big risk when it comes to property.
Absolutely. And so if there's a degree of insurance that's included in some of the packages, depending on which platform you use, whether it's Airbnb or other platforms. In some cases, there is a degree of insurance that's included as part of the platform, but you really need to manage risk on your own basis. Like I said, your insurer can cover the building itself and some of the contents, but some of the easily portable items, if you don't put those away, then those can't be insured.
And then car insurance. Ernest, I find the small print around car insurance just fascinating. There's such a sort of, as you know, a kind of insurance war going on. What do you need to look for in the small print if someone else is going to be driving your car for a bit, or say for just a week?
It's a similar situation where you're getting someone else, where someone else is paying you to use the car. Then it becomes a commercial policy essentially, and your standard personalized car insurance policy actually won't cover them. So that's a very, very important check that you need to do if you are having someone pay you for using your car. The more common scenario is where your friends or family are just in town, or you're not around and you're letting them use your car. By all means, that's not a problem. Ensure that they have a valid license. But 95% of insurance policies in South Africa cover you as long as that regular driver has your permission and they have a valid license. Do check out. There's a small number of policies in South Africa that are limited by a specific name being allowed to drive the car. So check out if you have one of those policies. And secondly, if you do have a policy that allows any driver, make sure that you understand what the additional excess would be. Some policies in South Africa charge an additional excess if somebody other than the regular driver is in an accident. So check that in advance if your insurer happens to be one of those.
And very quickly, the age of the driver matters, doesn't it?
Almost only in that last scenario that I described, where if your insurer charges an extra excess in certain circumstances when it's not the regular driver. So very often if the person that's borrowing the car is under 25 or they've had their license for less than a year, then you could be subject to an additional excess. So check if your insurer is one of those, and then it's good that you understand those T's and C's in advance.
Ernest North, thanks so much. Really do appreciate it. Co-founder of Naked. A lot to look at when you think about insurance. We'll speak to Ian Mann in a moment, his best books of the year. And don't forget Peter Tempelhoff, the chef, from 7:30.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud sole lead arranger and infrastructure finance structuring agent of the South African National Treasury's 11.8 billion rand infrastructure and development finance bond. Good evening, 8 minutes after 7. Plenty to come. We'll speak to Ian Mann in a moment, going through his best books of the year. And actually, it's been, if you consider what's happening around you, it's a sort of bumper time for ideas, for thoughts, for insights, producing some really interesting books at the moment. I'm pleased to see there are hardly any about leadership. My favorite sort of bugbear is going into, a shop and just seeing everybody queuing at the leadership. I mean, if it was that easy, people wouldn't be writing books about it. Anyway, we'll talk about that. He's here already. And then don't forget, from 7:30, Peter Tempelhoff, the chef. And I read today, I'm going to have to ask him, make sure that I understood this correctly, that he started studying economics and then chucked that in and decided to go and be a chef instead and has become one of the world's best chefs. I mean, really astonishing experiences that he creates. Good to hear from you as well. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and voice notes, of course, on 072 702 1702.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, interesting to see the Electricity Minister, Makgopa, and he was announcing today the 7 pre-qualified bidders to be a part of basically rebuilding our electricity grid. These are international companies. You heard last week the conversation with Carol Payton and Kashif Wickham about how they're going to work with South African companies who'll be BE partners. There's a big debate about whether we should do things in a slightly different way there or not. But Makgopa also talking about smelters, and we know that Eskom and the government and the smelting companies, the miners, have been talking about some sort of deal because electricity's just been too expensive, and that's priced them out of the market, essentially. Quite a complicated area. And I see that the minister said today there's going to be no free lunch. And in the end, you really are trying to square the circle the square, pick one, because all you're doing is you're trying to make sure that electricity is affordable for these companies. And the only way to really do it in a realistic way is through some kind of subsidy, either from other electricity users, in other words, people who pay the full price for electricity, that's you and I, or through tax from a government subsidy. But then you're subsidizing a private company. And things get more and more complicated from there. So no free lunch. I don't know how this is going to work. I know when we've spoken to the CEO of one of the companies, they were pretty optimistic that something serious was on the table. So I was very glad to hear that. I thought that was quite interesting. But still, we are just going to have to wait to see how this plans out. I think there's going to be a lot more water under the bridge before we know where we are. 11 minutes after 7.
The Money Show.
Business books.
Well, I'm pleased to tell you we've got some time with Ian Mann tonight, and he's going to take you through his books of the year. Ian, good evening. I was making the point a moment ago that the situation that we're in now, the sort of the different trends that we're seeing, the different dynamics, is probably making this quite a good time to be writing a book.
Well, there's so much going on. There really is a lot going on, and I think what we need to do now is to allow ourselves to be able to sober up a bit. And get back to basics. I think that the very first book I'm going to be sharing with you is on the back of the book, he says, this is a book for people who don't like books on leadership and management.
Yes,
okay.
My kind of guy.
Yes. Anyway, it's called Slaying the Standard. And what's most interesting about this book is that he's the author. I don't know him personally. He's a South African. He's built a thing called the Alpha Group, and apparently it's done extraordinarily well. And they're involved in things like insurance, fitness, and hospitality and other things. But what is so interesting about the book is that there's a lot of very practical, very wise things in the book, but they're down to earth. There's no rocket science here. The point is that it's the simple things that we should know that we don't know, or the things that we overlook, And as you're so busy with trying to maintain your business that you just don't get things done. Before we do that, I just want to point out one thing because I think this is relevant. In South Africa, the ratio of SMMEs to large businesses is 91 to 9. So we are, most South Africans are involved in SMMEs. These are ones, by the way, these are the registered ones.
Yeah.
And very few are in the very big ones. What we don't do enough talking about when we talk about leadership or management, managing businesses, is to worry about how does the smaller business run itself. And I think that what I liked most about this book was that he's looking primarily at, I thought he was aiming primarily at the small, medium and micro enterprise, and he's got a lot of very, very good information, a lot of good ideas that are worth talking about.
So one of the things I find interesting about so many leadership books is, you'll see that affect habits of people or whatever, and they'll say, get up early, or I like to take time to think before 6 a.m. I mean, no one's going to do that. So I'm interested by the point you make that this is all very doable.
Very doable. Very doable. And I think that one of the things he starts off by saying is, he says, perfection isn't what you're looking for. You're not looking for flawless. You're going to have to accept that thing doesn't exist. What's far more important than perfection, we are going to be perfect, is we're going to progress. Now, this is not a new idea. Way back in 2011, if my memory serves me correctly, Teresa Annabile from Harvard wrote a book called The Progress Principle. And what she did was she proved that the biggest motivator of human beings, because we have to motivate people to make progress, is not what we always thought it was. It's not that you're having fun at work. It's not that you have friends at work. It's not even that you're well paid. It's not that your boss is nice to you. None of those things count. In fact, all of those things together don't count as much as the one thing she says makes the biggest difference. And that is, I feel I'm making progress. She says this feeling of efficacy, that I'm actually getting better at something or other. So somebody can say, what was the best thing that happened to you today? It wasn't that you got a raise. I went to my boss. I said to him, I've got a project I want to do. And he said, go ahead. He said, go ahead. And that sort of feeling that my life is getting better, that I'm making progress, is really, really important. I think that one of the things he stresses here is it's not perfection. We're not looking for flawless perfection. All we're looking for is making progress, so you're just getting a little better all the time. I think that's a profound thought. And we've got to get away from the perfectionism and stuff because it's nonsense. It doesn't work. So I thought that was a very, very useful point. He also makes another useful point. And most of these points, by the way, are not points that no one has ever mentioned before, which is quite nice. The next one he talks about is having exceptional staff. And he said he wanted exceptional staff at one time and realized what a bad idea that was. Well, there's a lot of books, a number of books I've read about teams made up of really first-rate players, particularly football for some reason or other. We have a group of superstars. They don't do particularly well. You're better off having people who are not superstars who play together. And the type of things that you want to do, you want to get people who are able to get on with other people better. You want to be sure that you don't, when you get mad at somebody, I haven't checked this out, but he says your IQ drops 70%.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I don't know whether 70 is right or 40 is right, but your IQ drops definitely when you start getting mad at people. And he says that what we want to do with our staff is we want to be sure that we stop gossiping, we stop spreading rumors about colleagues, and we just accept that we have to get on with each other. That's it. We don't have to be friends, but we certainly have to get on with each other, and gossiping and telling and spreading rumors about people doesn't help anyone. All obvious stuff, but stuff we don't place much attention on. And then he talks about talk straight, and I'll talk to more about one of the other books which talks about talking straight. He says no sugarcoating. He said you don't go around protecting your turf. He says open the playing fields. If something is going wrong, open it. What they've done at a very, very one of the best run companies I've ever come across is Netflix and shows. In Netflix, they have a policy that to make mistakes is fine. We don't mind you making mistakes. All we expect you to do, we expect you to sunlight them. So if you've messed up, I've just lost $3 million because I invested in a dog, and you get everybody together and you say, look, I invested in this because I thought this would happen. I didn't take that idea into account.
Yeah.
I didn't look at this. I didn't look at that. And you go and you tell as many people as you possibly can. And the reason behind that, their reason behind that is that people want to get better all the time. And they've actually built into their culture. The culture of Netflix is we're not a family.
Yeah.
We're a team. And if you're not as good as the best player, we're going to relegate you. So everybody's very keen. I think that stimulus of getting people to open the playing fields and work is a really good one.
And then one of the other books you've picked is Conquering Crisis by Admiral William McRaven. Interesting.
Yes. William McRaven. I've read quite a lot of books about the military. And it's not because I have any respect for the idea of the military. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes human beings have ever made is to invest so many
things that kill you.
So many trillions in stuff which doesn't add much to humanity. But one of the things McRaven does, he was the head of special ops for the United States, and he at the end of his career he became the head of the universities of Texas, the system. And here's a man who's been through everything.
Yeah.
From Afghanistan to all sorts of things. And one of the things he does, he's got a 10-point plan, which I think, and the book, by the way, says, these are the lessons you better learn when you don't need them.
Yeah.
And the lesson starts with this is, bear in mind that the first report you get about something being wrong is wrong. It's whatever it is, you can be assured it's not correct. And I think that when we hear bad news, we tend to either fall over or try to respond to bad news, which is the wrong thing to do. Try and work out what's really going on. I thought it was very, very sound advice. The second thing he talks about is he says, throughout your career, as you're building up your management team or your friend team or your colleagues, see that you have a council of what he calls council of colonels, people who you can talk to. Those are the people who can say, you're talking nonsense, you're out of line, and they'll talk straight to you. They're not trying to cover anything. If you can surround yourself with a council of colonels, when things go wrong, they're going to be extraordinarily valuable to you. The third thing he says, which I love, he says, bad news doesn't get better with time.
No, you have to do something.
And people tend to think is, look, let me not mention this right now.
Yeah.
Let's try and see if it'll die down. It never dies down. And so when you accept, I might as well come and tell you right now that things have gone terribly wrong, then wait until you find out for yourself. Another point he mentions, which is obvious, but I think it's very useful, and he gives examples throughout the book of his experiences in the military and with these sorts of experiences. He says, weaponize the truth. There's nothing. So as soon as you start lying or covering up, you're going to get yourself into more and more trouble and have more and more people bothering you. The thing, actually weaponize the fact, I'm telling you exact truth, this is what it really is. There's a couple of other ones which I think which are particularly important. And the one is, don't rush to failure. Take your time as much as you possibly can to try and work out what's really going on and deal with things slowly and as carefully as you possibly can. He ended his career as the head of the University of Texas and really messed up.
Yeah.
He bought land which he hoped was going to be used for a tech university, which never happened, and it was a waste of money. And anyway, after he'd been beaten up publicly by the press, he said he heard a man who'd been in the military for a long time standing outside with his secretary and shouting, moral check. And he said, I know what the term is. And the guy burst into his office, past the secretary. In the military, they have a thing called a morale check. When things go wrong, people around you need to check. How are you feeling? How are you doing? Do you need any help? And I think that's such a wonderful thing. The people around you, they also need, it's not only you, you and your crisis, it's you and the whole group.
we do need to talk to some of the other books.
Please do.
Super Bloom, How Technologies of Connection Tear Us Apart. It's by Nicholas Carr. I haven't come across this before, but I mean, it sounds like what's really going on with with all of us. Social media, this sort of too much connection. We never get away from it. Australia is looking at banning social media for under 16s, or has done it, things like that.
The book is a veritable history of communication, from the telegraph to the live stream, and he shows what's happened with each evolution. There was a time when people bought a newspaper. Well, some people bought a newspaper, and when it was printed, it was relevant, but you only got it much later and could only read it, and only read if you bought it. Then we evolved, and eventually we got to a point where we got radio, so everybody could hear the same thing at the same time. And then we got to television, where we can also see the same things at the same time. And the way we've communicated has evolved a lot. As far as he's concerned, the biggest change was live feeds.
Yeah.
He said what happens is that live feeds are built on algorithms. So there's not somebody monitoring what's going on. The algorithm says, for example, to pick an example I've used before, the massacre of the Uyghurs was based not on the fact that they'd done anything wrong. It was based on the fact that the algorithms that they were fed were algorithms which stimulated anger and fear. Anything that stimulates anger and fear will keep you going and keep you more interested. Therefore, they'll send you more and more of those feeds. So you're being fed all the stuff that you really want to hear, or probably don't even want to hear, but it keeps coming at you. And probably one of the most dangerous things about all this is that it's not like somebody offering you cigarettes when you're 14 years old, or drugs when you're older. We want these drugs. We want them very badly because there's something that people want more than anything else. People want to be informed. And what they're doing is saying, we'll inform you. So that it's really, really addictive. And people spend an enormous amount of time on this. What I think is most important about Super Bloom, and I think it's a book very, very worth reading, it's a serious book and well-researched, is that that's where we're going.
Yeah.
And we might as well we have to deal with it. It's not going to go away. And we're not, by saying that little children can't use the internet,
it's not going to fix it.
So it's not going to fix it. It may delay it if we can. And
I mean, there's so much to. I mean, I think it's one of the big questions of our time. And then 5 Types of Wealth, Sahil Bloom.
Yes, I think the book is not an unusual book, but it's one of the best written books of the type. Sunil he was a son of what Americans call not a wealthy man. His father was a university professor, and so he didn't grow up in a home with great wealth, and he always wanted to be very, very rich. And the way to do that, he found out, was to go to university, do a degree in finance, join a finance company, and in a couple of years he'll be a millionaire, and he was. And he said what amazed him was that he wasn't happy. And he realized that he started doing surveys of people from ex-murderers to barbers to individuals, and asked them what makes people happy. And he came up with a set of ideas about what makes people happy. And the idea is to try and get your life to take care of these different elements.
Yeah.
But he hasn't got he doesn't make the mistake of talking about work-life balance. Balance is an engineering term. It's got nothing to do with my life. When I'm young and beginning a career, I have to spend much, much more time in the office than I have to do later on. But what he does do is he focuses on the things that really will make a difference. And that's time, your social life, your material wealth, your physical well-being, and your material conditions, and of course your financial situations. And he talks about calibrating all those things. And there's one image that I liked very, very much in his book. He talked about his father, who was a university professor, and he was flying across the country with his father. He says right throughout the 11-hour trip, whatever it was, his father was reading and making notes. And he said, Dad, you haven't even watched a single movie. He says, I work like this so I can take you on holidays with me when I go.
Yeah.
And I think we need to understand that. And he also has another compelling image. he says, who's going to be in the front row at your funeral? And he says, you've got to see that you spend the right quality time with the people who are likely to be in the front row. And then scares parents, scared me too, that when your children, you've got about 13 years of children, then you don't have them anymore. And for the first 13 years of your life, you're probably the most important, largest and strongest man in the block. But by the time they get to 13, you don't count, and all you are is a hotelier and a chauffeur. And I think getting all these things into context, I felt was a very, very nice idea. And it's a good thing to read every now and then.
Ian Mann, good to see you. Thank you for all of your contributions this year. Really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay. Ian Mann is our regular book review and MD at Gateways Business Consultants. Those books, Antonio Iorzo's Slaying the Standard, Conquering Crisis by Admiral William McRaven, Tribes by Michael Morris, Super Bloom by Nicholas Carr, and 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom are his 5 books of the year. Ian, good to see you. Thank you.
The Money Show. How I make my money.
24 minutes now to 8 the time. Well, I have to say, I think I've spoken to many people who do many different things over the years, but never for half an hour to someone who is a chef, and particularly not one as esteemed as our guest tonight. Peter Tempelhoff is the first South African chef to win the 3 Knives Award at the Best Chef Awards. He's also, of course, the person behind the multiple fine FYN dining experiences. He's worked here, he's worked in other places, he's done all sorts of things, and he is a very, very interesting person to talk to and someone who's had a very interesting career. Peter Tempelhoff, I'm sure that you're busy, I'm sure it's a busy time for you, so thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on The Money Show tonight.
Hey, Stephen, thanks. Great to be here. Nice to chat to you about this.
I have to start with a factual question. Is it true that you started out by studying economics?
Yeah, I did a lot of things. I wasn't an economist, but I studied economics at university. It wasn't my thing. And then I went into all sorts of different careers in tree felling and carpentry and home building and selling things and you name it, until I found my thing when I was ripe old age of 27.
Where were you when all this was happening? You're from Cape Town?
No, so I was born in the States. I moved here when I was 1. I lived in Joburg for a bit, and then I moved down to Durban, where I went to high school and university. And so some of it happened in Durban, then I went across to the States, and I worked in Texas for a bit, and then I came home, and in 1996, I decided to start cooking in the Cape. So I've been here kind of ever since. So this is my home. This is where I've been longest.
No, sure. Why cooking? I mean, was there something that dragged you to it? Was there you met someone's mate who did something and you thought, wow, did something else happen?
No, I think I've always had an inkling for it. You know, my mom, rest her soul, she was not the greatest of cooks. So I used to spend a lot of my time fixing her dinners up and throwing a handful of olives and this and a pinch of herbs and that and so chopped up ham and another thing. And I didn't realize until I was later in my career when I was kind of just doing nothing that really inspired me, that my mom's best friend actually said, listen, why don't you cook? I can see how much you love it. And that was it. And I haven't looked back since.
So from quite a young age, I mean, how old were you when you first started messing with your mom's cooking? How old were you when you first sort of found it interesting and were adding your own things to it?
I remember as far as I can remember, actually. Used to get stuck in my grandma's kitchen. She lived in Delmas, and she used to put on these elaborate dinners, and I was always in there interested as a 6-year-old, a 5-6-year-old, and then it just kind of grew. I was with my dad making apricot jam every summer in Linden, and, you know, it's just, I didn't realize until I started cooking that I had an interest in it. Yeah.
It's funny, I mean, sometimes something stirs you, I suppose. So you go and study. I have no idea how you study to be a chef, but I presume it involves a lot of time in a kitchen.
Yeah, so I came here to Bahnhoek, to Stellenbosch, and it is 1 year of intensive classes, and they try and teach you as much as they can and cram it in a year. And then it's another year of practical kitchens where you spend a block of 3 months in different kitchens, and it's still the same today. This is what the students do for a 2-year course, and 3 years a bit more specialized. But yeah, it was an inspiring time for me, and you know, because I was a bit older, I was 26 or 27. I took in a lot more quicker because I knew this is my last chance. I think a lot of chefs realize that. You know, they try a lot of things and they kind of end up cooking. And it's something that you can actually do well from. I only realized that afterwards.
So when you were learning, I still have people in the back of my mind sometimes when I'm making a journalistic conversation. I think, what would this person say? What would they do? Were there people like that from where you were learning, or did you actually quite quickly think, no, I can do this differently? I mean, I'm really looking for sort of some of your career influences when you were starting out, because I know there would have been people who would have influenced you later, but when you were starting out, were there particular people who played a role?
Yeah, like I said, my mom's best friend was the one that kind of lit that spark, and she was from Denmark, and she used to cook these elaborate lunches and dinners at her place, and because my mom and her were such good friends, I used to go there quite often. So she's passed away since then, but she was definitely an inspiration. And then, in training, and my first year I went to go eat, my first year of training, I went to go eat at the Grand Roche Hotel, where a French chef named Raymond Blanc, he was here cooking, he was doing a cooking show, and he was actually cooking a meal there that night. I managed to get a seat for it, and right then the penny kind of dropped, and I realized, after tasting his food and just looking how creative it was, that this is the right move for me, and I was happy that I made that choice. And since then, guys like Mark Pierre-White has been inspirational. He's the godfather of modern English cuisine, and I actually worked for him my first job in London, which is also amazing. And then it's just building upon your career, good places. The next place you go to must always be better. That's the stance I took, and I never wanted to go backwards. Never wanted to settle. I even took a job. I left Mark Pierre-White's restaurant as a sous chef, and I said I wasn't ready. I took 2 steps back as a chef de partie, just so I could learn more. And I actually worked for free for 3 months in London. They all thought I won the lottery.
Yeah, I'm sure. So just tell me how that works. When you're climbing, sort of the ladder, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but how do you get a gig at Mark Pierre-White in the first place? Did someone from Stellenbosch have to write a letter of recommendation? Did you have to hang around and wait for the great man himself to come out and say, look, I'm really good,
No, at that stage he was opening a lot of restaurants, and I happened to be working in my sister's bar in Crouch End in London, just doing some odd bar snacks, and I was working illegally. She was paying me by cash, and I knew I wanted to work in a kitchen. I just didn't know how, and the bartender there was good friends with the head chef at the restaurant, and he said, okay, come and do a trial. And I did a trial, and I just loved it from the day one. And he said, listen, don't worry about the visa. We'll make a plan for you. And back then, the restaurants could apply for visas for you. And so they applied for the visa, and then they stopped paying me cash, paid me legally for a while. So, yeah, that's how I started. And then from there, I went to go work in another Michelin star restaurant, and then, which was an English one, which was a great one. And then from there, I went to work for Locatelli. It was also an Italian 1-star restaurant. So I never wanted to go below 1 star wherever I worked. And it paid dividends, I can not recommend highly enough that the youngsters of today just do that. Don't look for the paycheck. Not at that stage.
Yeah. When you're in a kitchen like that, how important does the personality of the sort of head chef matter? Are they very different from kitchen to kitchen because of that? Or are they actually quite similar because there's a way to do these things?
Well, they are and they aren't. They all have their own personality, but it was always very regimental. Everything is done very militarily. So there's this hierarchy, and you've just got to earn your stripes and get yourself up that ladder. And the young ones, when they come into the kitchen, they're always abused, just like any youngster that comes into the military. They take abuse. They want to see how hard they are and how they can mold these new young chefs. And it's still like that today. Maybe not as angrily, because back then in the 90s, there used to be a lot of words thrown around and a lot of abuse, but things have kind of become a little bit easier to work in those conditions nowadays.
We've all seen the sort of documentaries and the reality TV and the this and the that, but swearing did seem to be a part of it. And I wondered if there was something about cooking that maybe led to more swearing. It's hard. You're working in a difficult environment. Mistakes cost money. The ingredients matter. Is there something to that?
Definitely. When you get tired, you get emotional. And when you get emotional, the pressure's on and you're getting pressurized from above. Yeah, it happens. It's just a natural thing that we do. And unfortunately, it's hard to hold back sometimes, especially when you're tired. You're it's your third or fourth double in a row, and you're doing the hours, and it's a 95-hour week, and everybody's shouting at you. You're gonna crack. It's not an easy industry, not at all. It's like one of the toughest industries to manage in, and you just got to be strong-willed, and you got to have determination that you're gonna push through, and this guy's not gonna get the better of you no matter what. Because it's easy just to retaliate and lose your job and try to find another job, and that's not the right way to do it. It's just bite your tongue and push through. You cut your finger, just wrap it up and carry on.
In a blue plastic.
You got to earn their respect. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Get stuff done. When you are working like that, and when you're leading a kitchen, Peter, and it's a long shift and there's lots of difficulty, how do you feel at the end of the day? Obviously tired. I mean, I would expect that. But is it still rewarding? Do you think, sure, I got that, I nailed that, or that worked out, or the kitchen did well here today?
Stephen, the feeling is absolutely addictive. This blood rushes through you. You feel you've accomplished something so great, and because you realize how tough it is. When you actually, the first day I did my solid service on my own in a really high pressure kitchen, I just felt like, I almost feel like you're elated, and it's addictive, and people go back for that. And you get this rush from the service, which you don't get from anything else except sports, I'd imagine. You get the same kind of rush. But it's very addictive. It's to get to that level, it's very extremely satisfying. So I think that's what people just keep going back, keep getting up every morning for.
When you're leading a kitchen like that, how important is it to have the people around you, so the people you're working with, your staff, who you can trust with the food? I mean, you obviously need to know that they're up for it, that they're at the right standard. And I've always thought, particularly as restaurants, I suppose like yours, but others, really rely on the chef's reputation. The chef's reputation really relies on the restaurant and everybody else too.
Yeah. Especially when you've got multiple restaurants like I do, it's so important to completely rely on the guy next to you, the guy underneath him, and then so on. And it's to inspire them is the trick, to keep them wanting to do amazing food for you all the time. That is the secret. I think you have to keep the guys inspired, keep them paid well, keep them fresh as well. We've adopted a 4-3-day week for the guys because it does get tiring. So there's 3 days off and 4 days on. And of those 4 days, they got to work at least 3 doubles. So that's, 12 hours and a double, that's 36. And they work another a half day somewhere. So they do get the time back. And that's how you got to do it. You just got to keep them motivated around you and comfortable, and keep food on the table plus some.
Yeah. Have there been any particular big trends while you've been in the food business, or the culinary business, I should call it? Do you see certain trends coming? I mean, do you see them sort of being big, maybe in Britain in the 90s in London, and not so big anymore? Different types of food, different ways of plating, the size of portions. I think that seems, from what I read, that's been a big change over the last 10 years.
Yeah, Nouvelle Cuisine brought along the tasting menus, and that was inspired from Japanese kaiseki. So it's not a new thing. It's been around a long time, just not here. But I think there is a big shift away from long course menus, so tasting menu restaurants. People like choice. Listen, I understand there's always going to be a tasting menu restaurant. We've got one feigned as a tasting menu restaurant because, we've got a story to tell there, and we want people to experience the journey that we want them on for the evening. But the other restaurants are all a la carte. I've really decided that we could have done another tasting menu restaurant at Aram, where we just opened. But I thought, you know what, people want bigger portions. They want to choose what they want to eat. If they want to come in for one course, they're welcome to. I think that is a big shift. And also there's a shift towards more natural cooking, lighter cooking, using a lot of olive oils. And, that's been around for 15 years now, but there's a big push towards natural meat as well, very clean meats. And it's a big push also away from, I've noticed there's a lot less vegans and vegetarians coming through the doors, actually. I'm not sure why that is, but 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a lot of vegetarians and vegans coming through, and there's also a lot of gluten allergies that were coming through, but it's kind of lightened up now recently. Which I'm not sure why. Maybe it's a better quality grain, why there's less gluten issues. I'm not sure. People are realizing that protein's important, maybe.
Yeah. Interesting. Sure. I have no idea. It's the first I've heard of it. We're speaking to Peter Tempelhoff. If, like me, you're beginning to realize you haven't had your dinner, I'm 10 minutes away from it. We'll return with him in a moment.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB, proud sole lead arranger and infrastructure finance structuring agent of the South African National Treasury's 11.8 billion rand infrastructure and development finance bond.
The Money Show. How I make my money.
Speaking to Peter Tempelhoff, the chef, and of course you'll know him having won 3 Knives of the Best Chef Awards, also, who runs the Fine Dining, FYN Dining Experiences. Peter, one of the things that I sort of grew up with, and you and I are probably roughly similar ages, but when I first sort of thought about chefs was when we have this sort of wave of, I don't know if I call them personality chefs, reality TV chefs, sort of famous people who are famous not just for being chefs, but for their personalities. This might be a strange question, but is that good for the quality of food? I get there's an air of salesmanship about it. I mean, I have no problem with that. But could it sometimes get in the way of the food? You know, whatever this person has said to that person?
I think it depends on how you structured your business, Stephen. You can, if you structure it in a way that it runs without you having to be there every day, then, and you really trust the people who are running each establishment, then yes, it shouldn't really affect it. What it does do, it just keeps people coming to your restaurant because it's great marketing, being on TV all the time and, being a personality. So in a sense, yeah, and I don't know yet. I'm not a chef like that, I don't know if I'd want to be, actually. I've done a bit of TV in the past, but it's just not my thing. I like being in the trenches with the guys and running things from behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah.
But who knows? Who knows? There's a lot of years left.
No, sure, and things happen. Do you think a person's personality is reflected in how they cook? And I realize that might be a strange question, but do you think, if your mood is X one day, does it affect how you cook? Maybe if you're just cooking for yourself, or does it, does a person's personality come through in any way?
Listen, your moods definitely come through. When I fell in love with my wife, my flavor profile changed. I was more creative, and I definitely noticed it. I noticed, wow, I'm a lot more alive, and I've always been creative, but it kind of just sparked it off. And yes, definitely, I've woken up after a dream, and I've dreamt about a dish, and I put it on, and it works. And so, it's definitely, if you're in a bad place in your life as well, it definitely it hampers creativity. It stifles a lot of things you do, and it doesn't give you the energy you need. And you need a lot of energy in the kitchen. Your energy needs to be infectious as well to your staff around you. You need to be positive. So for sure, absolutely.
Peter, I don't know if you can just move around and try and improve the reception on your cell phone a little bit.
Sure.
I am presuming, so I am not a perfectionist. We were talking to someone earlier about business books who was saying one of the lessons from a book is instead of, being a perfectionist in business, people want progress. But I wonder if your game, what you do is actually quite different, and actually perfection really, really matters.
Oh, without a doubt. It's the small margins. There's incremental gains. They make such a big difference. It's that difference between 95 and 100%. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, is this thing out of line by a millimeter or a centimeter? That's, that definitely makes a difference, especially when you're talking about the high end of cooking. Flavors as well, and a gram of salt too much, too many drops of lemon makes a big difference. So and that's what we're searching for, that perfection, or as close to the perfection as we can get. We'll never reach it, but we got to strive for it every day. That's why we come up. We get into the kitchen, we get our knives out, and we cook every day to reach it every day. And although we're doing the same things over and over, we try to be better the next day than we were yesterday. So, yes, definitely.
You're moving, and you've moved, and you sort of led the way really into sort of Afro-Japanese cuisine. And I think for a lot of people, it's not something that's entirely predictable. Was there a particular place you got that inspiration?
Yeah, so Fane, when I launched Fane, the idea was there was a gap in the market for something like this. But most importantly, is something that I was really passionate about, and I was really determined to make it work. I knew I love Japanese food from a youngster. There was something about it. I think South Africans do. We love that umami. All of us love a bit of sushi, you know. There's something about those flavors and the exoticness of it that we like. And my first trip to Japan in 2008, I realized, wow, this is what I want to do. And it wasn't for another 10 years of working with these ingredients and trying to understand them more and the culture that I decided, no, Fane is for me the next step. But I don't want to lose a sense of place. I don't want to lose that I'm standing or sitting in a restaurant in South Africa eating. I don't want to eat Japanese food. I had to blend the two carefully. And I think the results are quite incredible because it was the refined style of Japanese cooking with our rugged African ingredients. There's something about it that just resonated with all the guests. Like, I think there's something that Cape Town is ready for, and that's what works so well. And I was in the city. There was not a lot of options for high-end in the city. There's some great restaurants. And also because we're close to the hotels, and also we're in a quirky old silk factory in the east side of town. It's on a dodgy street. I think there's a bit of an allure about that. You know, you come into what shouldn't be a great restaurant, but you take an elevator to the top floor and it takes you into kind of Manhattan or Tokyo. So yeah, there's something, that's why people love it because of that, you know, because Fane is a very different place. And we try to do the same with the other restaurants. We don't want to carbon copy restaurants. So Beyond is celebrating the wine estate that it's on, like in every single way it can. It's got the vineyard views. And then Aram, the new one, we're just celebrating the farm animals. So they're each so unique offerings. And even the ramen head and sushiya, you know, it's my love for Japanese street food that's coming through. So each of our restaurants, although they're a group of 6 restaurants, they're all so very different, which makes them very difficult to manage.
No, I'm
it's very
sure.
difficult to work out the average spends and, you know, because they're all so different. If I had a chain of 6 of the same restaurants, it'd be so easy. You know, but I do like a challenge.
No, well, I can hear that. Peter, it's been wonderful to talk to you. I've learned so much. I was saying to our team today, I have actually so many questions to ask. We could go on all day, but unfortunately we can't. But thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a productive festive season.
And thanks for thinking of me. You too. Enjoy your Christmas.
Cheers. Peter Tempelhoff, the chef there behind Fane, and of course the first South African chef to win 3 knives at the Best Chef Awards. Really interesting story, actually. And most chefs, I sort of think, have gone from where they were born to somewhere else and then often back again. There is a sort of story of the journey there in some way, but I found that really, really interesting. Peter Tempelhoff, thank you.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB, proud sole lead arranger and infrastructure finance structuring agent of the South African National Treasury's 11.8 billion rand infrastructure and development finance bond.
Well, U.S. markets still not looking positive. Still concerns and lots of data coming out this week, I think, is a big factor. The Dow Jones is down 0.27%. The Nasdaq is down 0.38%. The S&P 500 is down 0.18% as I talk to you now. Tomorrow is a public holiday. Please enjoy it. We'll be back with you on Wednesday. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.